He wanted to sweeten the truth for a payout. Instead, he turned his house into evidence and himself into the perp. The insurance claim. Mankato woke to quiet. The road shone with wet asphalt, lawns scattered with clots of ice like someone had spilled a handful of white beans. In the night, hail had come through town, not a catastrophe, more a nuisance. Everyone told it their own way. The neighbor, Mr. Jensen, tugged the paper from his box and called over the fence. Pea-size that hail, nothing to write home about. Donald stood on the porch in a robe with a mug of coffee and said, "Pea-size, come on, I saw chunks like golf balls. Surprised the roof isn't punched clean through." His wife looked past his shoulder, hair a mess, voice calm but with a warning. "Insurance isn't a lottery, Don." He shrugged, not turning. "Then why pay for the ticket?" She went back inside and shut the door. Donald sipped, winced, cold. On the kitchen table sat unpaid bills and beside them a receipt from the hardware store, hammer, purchased last week. He ran his hand along the porch rail. The rough paint flaked under his fingers like the house itself whispering, "I'm old, I'm fragile." In the yard a rusting grill, next to it a crooked ladder, all of it could play his way. Across the street a magpie hopped the grass, flipping hail clots with its beak. Donald watched it and thought, you can turn anything if you know where to peck. A sedan with the insurance logo rolled past the block. Slowed, turned the corner, a small pinch of nerves. Tomorrow they'd be here, questions, photos. He needed the house to look worse. He sat on the step, set his mug down, rubbed his temples. His wife appeared again in the door. "You're not going to do anything stupid, are you?" "Me," he smirked. "I'm just waiting for them to make us whole." She held his eyes a long beat, said nothing, went back inside. Donald stayed. From the entry drawer he pulled a notebook, opened to the first page and wrote big, "Damages, roof, windows, siding." He circled the word catastrophe twice. A dead yard sale sign from last week twitched in the wind and swung on a rusty nail, squeaking in time with his thoughts. Mankato looked calm again, but the lie was already in the air. It hadn't started in the sky. It started here on the porch in Donald's head. The morning was clear, too clear for anyone counting on disaster. Donald sat by the window, drumming the sill. At 10 sharp, the sedan with the insurance logo pulled up. Out stepped a man in a gray suit and pocketed vest. Badge, Kenneth Miller, claims appraiser, calm as a bookkeeper. Tablet in one hand, tape measure in the other, a sandwich sticking out of a pocket. "Morning," Donald said, aiming for confidence. "Morning, this your place?" A quick look, like a doctor who already knows the diagnosis. "Yeah, ours," took a hard hit. Kenneth lifted his chin to the roof. Sun washed the dark shingles, a few scuffs, a couple hairline cracks. He photographed the facade while chewing as he walked. "You say the hail was big." "Big as a fist," Donald said. "Thought the windows would blow." The appraiser palmed the siding, bent closer. Out came the tape. He measured a dent with the sandwich clenched in his teeth, clicked another photo, then a small hem. "Hail's like potatoes in a sack, it drops where it pleases. Here yours looks like someone laid out a ruler." Donald forced a smile. "Wind hit in a band, that happens." Kenneth didn't answer. He rounded the house, peered through the shed opening at the racked door, came back to the porch. "Damage exists, but minimal. I'll get on the roof, you bring a ladder." Donald brought the old rusty ladder. It squealed as Kenneth climbed. Up there he palpated shingles, measured every mark, clicked and clicked. "Their whole strip," Donald called up. "You see it." Kenneth photographed, said nothing. He came down and tapped at the tablet. "Mr. Donald, you've got minor loss. The carrier decides, I just submit." He shook Donald's hand cool and quick, stuffed the sandwich stub in his pocket, and headed for the car. Donald stood on the porch watching the sedan take the corner. Inside, a boil, minor loss, leave me with nothing. He squeezed the keys until the metal bit his palm. His wife came out after, looked at him a long time. "You're smiling like the check already cleared," she said softly. He jerked away, but her look stuck between his shoulder blades, cold and doubtful. That evening he went to the shed again. On the hook hung the new hammer. He held it in his gaze and understood the roof would have a new sound tomorrow. The yard went dark. A lone streetlight threw a yellow oval across the roof. 2:30. The town asleep. Donald stood by the shed, new hammer in hand, jacket over pajamas, boots without laces. He eased the old ladder to the wall. The ladder groaned like a warning. He climbed slow, breath measured. In his hand the hammer felt heavier than daylight. On the roof he held his breath. Below, a sleeping street, windows black. He raised the hammer and brought it down. A dull bong across the night, like a rock tossed against a tin can. Again and again. The rhythm settled, metronome steady. 7, 8, 9 marks in a straight line. The hammer slipped and clattered down. A cat yowled below, spooked. Donald doubled over and hissed SHH, which only sounded louder. Next door, Mr. Jensen woke and peered out. In the streetlight he saw a silhouette on a roof, an arm rising and that odd beat of blows. Vandals, he decided. In a minute he was dialing the police. Inside Donald's kitchen a light snapped on. His wife, sleepy in a robe, she caught a shadow flicker across the window. "Don, someone's on the roof," tension in her voice. He froze, then called. "Raccoons, must be raccoons." She frowned, killed the light, went back. He exhaled, heart pounding like he'd already been caught. Sirens far off. He tucked the hammer under his jacket, came down the ladder, stood in the yard, practicing confusion. A cruiser rolled up, red and blue washed the facades. 2 officers stepped out. "Evening, you called?" one asked. "Yeah," Donald rushed, heard banging. "Kids again, I bet, been a problem all summer." The officers traded looks. One ran his beam over the roof. "No fresh sign, we'll sweep the block." Donald nodded too eagerly. Vandals, the word left his mouth so often he nearly believed it. The police drove off hunting a phantom crew. He stayed, staring at the roof where a neat chain of dimples already marched, future evidence. His even rhythm had made the shingles look less like storm-struck and more like chalk marks on a school board. The lie had a shape now, and it was louder than any hail. Mankato woke to hollow gossip. Papers weren't delivered yet, but the news had legs. Outside the bakery 2 women argued. "They say a teen gang with bats walk the roofs on purpose." "What teens?" Jensen saw a black van with no plates. "On the laundromat steps." "They smashed bottles in the park, I heard it." "I saw a flashlight in the windows, must be organized." Rumors rose like someone sprinkling yeast. Donald listened and nodded, playing victim. Inside, a cold knowledge, the story no longer belonged to him. By noon, the police were canvassing, writing statements. People talked, everyone added their own. Bicycles, hoodies, kids with knives. On paper, a whole legend took shape. That evening, the school hosted a neighborhood watch meeting. Tables in a U, coffee urns and cookies. The secretary, a solemn old fellow, lettered the minutes. Item 1, possible group of teenagers. A woman in glasses raised a hand. "Maybe it's raccoons." The secretary frowned and carefully wrote, "Unknown subjects, possibly raccoons." Folks argued, floated a curfew for kids. A patrolman sat to the side, jotting, face a stone. Donald, in the middle, felt like the lead in a strange play, every line more ridiculous. Afterward, the officer pulled him aside. "Mr. Donald, need to clarify, anyone with you last night?" Donald opened his mouth, and his wife stepped up. I was asleep, she said quietly but firm. I confirm nothing. It hit like a drum. Donald froze. The officer noted it and nodded. So no alibi, he said, even. Donald tried to answer, but his wife's look stopped him. Not anger, not fear, something else, doubt. He didn't sleep, the street was quiet, his head was not. Those silly meeting words clanged. Van with no plates, broken bottles, possibly raccoons. He knew the more absurd the legend got, the closer the cops came to the truth. The town lived by a gang story. The legend was already pointing at Donald's house. The Ford Cruiser stopped out front again at first light. This time Officer Peterson brought company, Kenneth Miller from the insurer. They stepped out near synchronized, one with a notebook, the other with tablet and tape. Figure we'll combine visits, Peterson said flat. Save everyone the trip. Donald staged a smile, inside tight. He brought the same rusty ladder, it squeaked when it hit the wall. Kenneth went first, palpated shingles, pulled tape, measured dents, photographed, businesslike. Peterson watched from below and suddenly said, "Funny, the spacing on those marks matches the rungs on your ladder." Kenneth nodded, sandwich clamped in his teeth. "Regular spacing, hail doesn't march in formation." Donald flared. "That's the wind laying it in a strip, happens with a vortex." Peterson squinted up. "Sure, we got disciplined wind here." Mr. Jensen was already at the fence, listening like opening night, his face straight, lips twitching like he was swallowing a laugh. Kenneth came down, flipped through photos. The marks looked too tidy, like someone had drawn a pattern. "Mixed ages on the damage," he said dry. "These darkened old, these bright real new, too new." "It was all one storm," Donald blurted. "Some chunks hit harder." The officer didn't answer, wrote. In the silence the ladder squeaked again. His wife appeared in the doorway, barefoot in a robe, looked from her husband to the cop. "Don, if truth costs that much," she said softly, "do the math on the lie." Donald stopped, the words hit harder than any charge. He tried to smile, came out crooked. Peterson shut the notebook. "We'll be in touch," he said. Kenneth shrugged, retracted the tape, headed for the car. Donald stayed in the yard, staring at the roof where a dark band of neat marks ran, less proof of weather now than a receipt for his own stupidity. Mr. Jensen crushed a cigarette on the fence rail and said, "Well, we'll see what's next." Donald didn't answer. The old for sale sign from last week's sale rocked in the breeze. The squeak sounded like it was laughing at him. Mankato's morning went on as ever, coffee mugs on porches, mowers whining next door, but on Elm Street, folks peaked more than usual. Around 9, a patrol car rolled up to Donald's place. No lights, no need, the crowd gathered itself. Mr. Jensen set a folding chair by the fence, sat like for a matinee, a beer can without a tab in his hand, though it was barely breakfast. Officers Peterson and his partner stepped out easy, like for a routine check. One adjusted his belt, the other yawned. "Morning," Peterson said. "You got anybody fixing your roof?" "No," Donald said, working a smile. "Why?" "Just thinking Harper and Sons doing a discount." Pulling on gloves, he added, now to business. "You found something." Donald's fingers trembled on his coffee mug. "Did," the partner said mild. "We've got a false 911 call, and a pattern on the roof that matches your ladder." Donald froze. "That's silly, I'm the victim here." "Victim," Peterson repeated. "Then why call the cops on yourself?" He took out the cuffs. The click was soft, but fences went quiet. Jensen leaned forward like the good part of the show. "Mr. Donald, you're under arrest on 3 counts, Peterson said. "False reporting, insurance fraud, criminal damage to property your own." "You don't understand," Donald muttered. "I got debts, I just wanted to get by." The partner nodded like he'd heard it 100 times. Everybody wants to, sir. Not everybody hammers their own roof. They walked him to the car, neighbors in windows on lawns pretending to be out for nothing. A woman held her phone up, recording. You know, Peterson told his partner as they seated Donald, Davy Repair does roofs cheaper. Yeah, the partner said, their warranty's lousy, though. It sounded like idle talk over hot dogs. The car pulled away slow, leaving the yard empty. On the roof, a straight band of dimples darkened his signature. Mr. Jensen sipped, leaned back, and said to no one. Solid show, didn't even buy a ticket. 3 months passed, a hot, cloudless Mankato summer. Lawns burned out, asphalt crazed. Donald's roof rusted and glinted in the sun like a giant display case for his mistakes. A for sale sign hung on the facade. Day and night the wind pushed it and it squeaked in the same beat his hammer once kept. Neighbors, passing, heard that squeak and remembered the night. The magpie came back, it hopped along the roof, pecked shiny nails and bits of shingle like scavenging trophies from a battlefield. Folks who saw it smirked, even birds profit where a man loses everything. Donald's wife left town almost right after the arrest. First they said she went to her sister S, then filed for divorce. One morning an envelope from a realty office sat on the stoop. No signatures, just the broker's logo. Everyone understood, the sale wasn't just a sign anymore, it was official. Donald waited for trial in a motel by the highway. Sometimes people saw him at the grocery, wrinkled shirt, eyes of a man who still can't figure how his life fell apart in 2 weeks. Nobody talked much. The town had rendered its verdict. The Vandal gang tale turned into a punchline. Outside the bakery. Remember how spooked we were, van with no plates, kids with bats. Turns out he was just pounding his own roof. They laughed, shaking their heads. At dusk a trucker asked a local kid at the corner, "What's with the house, beat-up roof for sale?" Kid shrugged. Some guy tried to scam insurance, now nobody wants it. Hail bad, the trucker asked. The kid grinned. Hail not so much. That one line was enough to close the book. Mankato slipped back into its quiet life. Only the empty house with the rusting roof reminded everyone that disaster doesn't always start in the sky. Sometimes it starts in your head and hits harder than any hail. The sign squeaked again in the wind. 1, 2, 3 steady, like the echo of a hammer in the night.